Welcome to episode 4 of the Resurrected You podcast. As ever, my name is David and I'm sitting 350 miles across from Mr. Alex Aldridge. How are you doing today, Alex?
Ahoy, hoy. I'm doing all right as long as you care this week.
Yeah, well, I was about to say two things to note. I think I've increased our distance by 50 miles. I think I usually say 300 miles after I said that. And did you take note, I did not ask you how you were this morning, so that it was a true surprise when you answered my question this morning.
I actually do think that you're underselling the distance apart that we are anyway.
Have we moved further? I guess we may have, because I
forgot about that.
I've moved north of Aberdeen now, whereas I used to live south, so we've certainly increased by about 30 miles minimum. What direction did you move from the old St. Neots?
Southeast. Well, mainly east. So
okay, so
let's find out.
We're going to have to look it up now, because this is obviously
so
the
important
most pressing part of this podcast. Yeah. I'm going to have to write it down as well so that I get the mileage spot on in case anyone wants to try and run it during the podcast. Do you think, so if you were allowed to take any mode of transport and time your beginning in any way you wanted, i.e. like you got to choose when you started, could you make it from my house to your house during the length of a podcast, do you think?
You could probably
fly. If you say conservatively, we always aim for an hour and a half, don't we? But we normally get about 2 hours because we're long-winded old sacks of air. So I say 2 hours. I don't know if you could do it. I think
if you're counting getting to the airports and from the airports, there's no way you could do it. The flight's about an hour 10. Although I do live oh no, it's not from Stansted though, is it? But I live quite near Stansted now.
Yeah, well, because of the new road built in Aberdeen, I could get to the airport in probably about 15 minutes.
We are 513 miles apart.
513 miles apart. Nah, I don't think it's doable. We couldn't get to one another during.
It's an 8.5 hour drive.
Even if have we even recorded enough podcasts so that if you did it back to back, could you drive? Probably we'd be starting to cut.
We're not even a road trip length yet. Right, 4 hour special, lads. Buckle up. Right, why don't you tell everybody what we're doing today, sir?
Yes, we're back for episode 4 to continue our sort of game club-esque theme that with the new theme that we're going for with the winner issue. We have been playing through, and hopefully you have too, the new Xbox title, The Medium.
We have.
Do you know who developed this? Oh, it's Team Bloober Team, right?
Yes, previously of
who are
games
famous.
Like Layers of Fear, is it?
That's correct. Yep. Because they had a niche pedigree behind them, didn't they? Behind coming into this game,
they did. Is this published by Microsoft? I think it is, isn't it?
I think you're right. Yeah, they must have. You paid for it because there were news reports very soon after it came out that they had already covered development costs. So I think actually that's not a signifier of a madly successful game. It's a signifier of Microsoft having thrown a lot of money into the development of this, I would guess.
Or not a lot. So therefore they didn't need to cover it with a lot because it's on Game Pass.
Yeah,
they're not making bank.
Yeah.
No, they published it themselves. It's self-published by the look of it.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, so they must. Well, I guess we'll never know, and I guess we'll never know because probably each deal is unique. But developers must get money for having their game on Game Pass. I don't know whether it's a per download basis or if it's just a lump sum. Probably both and neither.
I've been wanting to know that for years. I don't think it's ever been clearly explained, ever.
No, I think it's probably wrapped up in NDAs, so we might never know.
Yeah, you're probably right. But it has to be viable because everyone's on there now. Even the biggest lads are on there.
Yeah, and it's the way the industry's going. So
Microsoft has clearly put all their efforts behind it for the new consoles. So
yeah, it seems like it's doing well for itself. They announced something like they've got 18 million subscribers. So that's what, 18 million times $10 a month. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, and I'd assume that that's a lot more than Xbox Series X's are in the wild right now. A lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. I did see some interesting news. So they think that obviously the PS5 is selling better at the moment than the Xbox, but it's actually not that far behind, which I thought was an interesting development.
Yeah, I haven't really been able, because all you ever hear is there's none of any of them. So I've never actually seen any sales figures for either. But that is, I suppose the PS5 selling more is to be expected based off of the last generation.
Based off the last generation and the sort of business model they're going for, whereas like Sony are very much still married to the generational console, whereas Xbox are. I think we've probably spoken about this before. We've certainly spoken about it in our private time. That Microsoft's true competitors are more service-based companies. I mean, to an extent, Netflix are more of a competitor to Microsoft at the moment than Sony are long term, because
good point. Yeah,
they want the money out. They want the regular income out your pocket, and they don't actually care where you play your games, whether it's on a PC or a console, as long as you're invested in that marketplace, which is the reason I'm probably mainly on Xbox at the moment, because it's such a good offering.
Yeah, absolutely. I struggle to think of better value that I've ever experienced in this industry, considering we grew up playing video games when N64 was charging £60 per cart, and then getting scolded in court for overcharging purposely at Christmas time just to mug us off even more.
Oh, did they? Yeah. I've got a memory of the South Park Nintendo 64 game costing like £80.
It might have done,
and I don't know if it's real or not. Which is an unbelievable scenes for that long ago.
It depends what unscrupulous place you bought it from. I remember First Compute in St Neots would definitely charge an arm and a leg.
I think it was actually Virgin. It was in a Virgin shop. You know, remember when they were a thing?
I did. Yeah. I thought you were going to roll out a Woolworths at me then, but I suppose they were more reasonable, which is hence why. That's where I used
to go on. So me and my cousin, for a good number of years, used to always ask for money for a Christmas, and part of the Christmas ritual was to find a way into Aberdeen on a bus when we were kids and go to Woolworths and spend all our money on PS1 games.
Very nice.
Dave Mira is one game I bought from Woolworths, and I can't actually remember any others.
I definitely remember seeing BMX XXX on a shelf in Woolworths, but I did not buy it.
Woolworths was so good for games.
Yeah?
That's where my favourite place to go for video games was when I was a kid. I don't know why. I think I just liked Woolworths. It was just a good sort of catnip shop for kids, wasn't it? It just had everything in it.
Yeah, that's true. I think I was just forced by my more frugal dad to buy stuff from Special Reserve. And that way as well, when he called them up to order...
What is that? That sounds like a cheap whiskey. What on earth?
It does, doesn't it? It sounds like a tramp's brown paper bag joint.
Yeah.
It was like a mail order thing, and they'd have advertisements in every single magazine. It was like you had to join. You had to pay to join Special Reserve to be a part of this club.
And were they cheaper, were they?
Oh, yeah, they were cheaper. And you used to get free gifts. I'm pretty sure... I used to give like Mad Catz controllers away and stuff like that. But... I remember I was not old enough to get Perfect Dark on the N64, so my dad just agreed to buy it from Special Reserve over the phone because obviously he was old enough. And my mum was not pleased, but when was she ever?
Yeah, I guess so. In a nutshell, that's what this podcast is about.
Yeah,
because I realised you asked me to talk about the medium, and then we spoke about Woolworths for 10 minutes.
We've certainly gained a ranking of medium so far on this podcast with our focused chat.
So I think we did briefly touch on it, but essentially what this is a sort of a book club episode on the medium where Alex and I have played through the game, and we're going to talk about it sort of area by area, and discuss what we think of the game, and hopefully you guys come along for the ride in the discussion. And if you've got any thoughts on what you think of this podcast, or any thoughts on the game itself, at us on Twitter at winnerisyoupod to tell us what you think, and we'll happily chat about it with you.
Yes, please do. Shall we just jump into going through the game?
Yeah,
because I'm sure our opinions will come up piecemeal as we go along.
Yeah, let's do it. And I think we've already displayed a propensity for veering off in directions.
So hopefully that's why people
that'll probably happen. Yeah. So kick us off, Alex.
Okay, so the game begins. We have a dream sequence, and we have the main character Marianne explaining how her dream always begins with a dead girl, and to immediately veer off. This is a very early impression that the animations in this game, specifically the lip syncing, is really off. It's really not good, it's quite jarring start to the game when they're trying to go for something profound, and then it just looks wrong, considering how many games we've seen with excellent lip syncing and facial capture and animation in the last 5 years. This was an immediate kind of kick in the nuts to me. I don't know how you felt.
Yeah, I was a little bit lost in this, and I couldn't decide whether it was something they brought on themselves or something the sort of media brought on them. But this was at least presented to me as sort of the first true next gen game, and they seemed to be going quite hard for having a visually striking experience. And I just thought, actually, with the lip syncing and the eye movements, just like looking in strange directions, and it kind of even looked odd when she was walking along, like if she'd walk through a puddle, the puddle animation where it splashed would be just off, so that the animation was sort of half in the puddle, half outside the puddle, and like it was just a bit jarring to the point that I was just like, no, this isn't what I was sold in terms of it being like some sort of wonderful visual experience.
I couldn't agree more.
On top of the fact it didn't run very well.
Yeah, well, this is why when we were talking about what was thrown behind this by Microsoft, I can't believe it was a lot, because it's definitely a double A game, if you want to use that terminology. It's from minute one, it doesn't feel like a triple A experience, and it certainly doesn't feel like this is the first game that's been purely developed for this brand new console I've got, which is such a shame. I mean, that doesn't mean the game's necessarily going to be terrible, but it means that from a technological standpoint, it's only a letdown.
Yeah, absolutely. I think ultimately, like, if we were people that were really, really invested in like looks, graphics, fidelity of games, we would be playing on PC, and we would have spent thousands of pounds on a PC rather than being quite happy to play on our consoles. But if you're sold as it being some sort of true next gen experience, I just came away thinking it's not that. It's not that.
No.
And I'm assuming it just ran poorly because are they just went, like in the split sequences? Are they just rendering two things at the same time? Is that what they were struggling with?
Digital Foundry went into this when they did their sort of tech review of the game, and basically what's happened is apparently the developers have somehow got the frame pacing wrong. So it's not that the game essentially can't handle producing it's only 30 FPS anyway, which again was disappointing for an Xbox Series X game, but it doesn't really hamper the game as much as it would if it was some kind of action or shooter or whatever. But basically, that the frames are presented out of order, which is why you get a lot, and there is a lot of sort of frame drops and freezes and weird blurring effects going on in this game. Apparently it's fixable, and Digital Foundry have reached out to the developers, Blooper Team, to explain to them about this. And apparently they've done this in the past, and it has been patched into some games they've mentioned it for. But at the time that we played this for the podcast recording, the game was in a really bad way frame rate wise.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame, really, because it's a game that sort of, at least it seems to me, that a game that sort of lives and dies by its cinematic nature and being able to pull the player into the experience. It's not one of these Twitch shooter games where you're enjoying the gameplay, so to speak. So really, the way it runs and the way it pulls you in is important, and having things like frame rate and whatever is going on with the game dropping out detracts from that, which is a shame.
Yeah, it does. Especially, as you say, that with the attempt at this cinematic presentation with the multiple camera angles and the old sort of Silent Hill style, it's really jarring, because that's where it seems to suffer the most. when it's going for its most ambitious cinematic shots is where it starts to chug the most. It's a real shame.
Yeah.
Okay, so we start playing the game. We're looking for a tie clip to get for this guy called Jack, who is Marianne's adopted father.
Jeff Bezos. I'm going to hold on to that joke for as long as I live.
Yeah, and as long as he doesn't live. Because it's his funeral. So this is where we first use insight, which is holding down the left bumper on the controller. It's like a detective vision, really. And we can locate a tie clip under a clock. Apparently, I think she says something like, because Jack runs a funeral home and they lived above it, that's apparently what gave Marianne her medium powers. Did you catch that?
Right. No, I didn't catch that at all.
So,
she caught it like a disease. Is that what you?
I guess so. Or she realised, I suppose, that she's in above a funeral home. She just kept hearing everybody having a chat downstairs and wondered what was going on, and then suddenly realised, oh, hang on a minute, I see dead people.
So, yeah. So basically, she's the kid from The Sixth Sense at this point.
And that's what I got early doors. A big sort of
Yeah.
And I was hoping it wasn't going to pull a whole "everybody's dead" kind of thing. Spoilers for Sixth Sense there. This is the first part of the game as well where we kind of engage in this. There's a lot of elements of this borrowed from Resident Evil. So we have to combine the tie and the clip together, which is just a marvel of game design. And we stick the tie back on Jack, put him into his what is that called when you're in a hole in a morgue? Does that have a name? When you wheel them back into they're on a tray.
I bet it does, but I don't know what that is. Just morgue hole.
That's literally what I wrote in the notes was a morgue hole. So when she puts him back in there, the lights start to flicker. She senses something, and then she walks out of the door of this prep room, and then there's a shadow lurking at the top of the stairs. I have no idea who that shadow was meant to be. Do you? Was it
I assume
Jack? Yeah. Because as you go towards it disappears, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it must have been him, because as you go up the stairs, the door of the office swings. It closes. It's been opened, and then it closes on you. So as you go in, you hear glass break, and then it's just a complete tip in there. The cabinets are all open. There's chairs turned over. There's loads of urns on shelves, and one of them's knocked on the floor. So Marianne bends down to pick it up, and then she feels the sensation in her head, and this is where we jump into the spirit world for the first time, where everything's kind of orange.
Do we know why? Did we find out why everything got wrecked?
I think it's Jack's looking for his. Oh, is he looking for a notebook? He's looking for. Jack's looking for. I'm assuming Jack tore it up doing that.
Yeah, I've never myself churned a room like that while looking for a notebook.
I don't know why a notebook would be somehow underneath a chair to an extent where you have to turn the chair over to make sure it's there. I mean, if it's not under this chair, I can see it already. I don't have to turn the chair over.
Every time if you drop your pen, you just walk up and then flip the chair. Yeah!
I better smash all these urns in these glass cabinets, because that's definitely where I put my notebook. Dozy old bastard. So yeah, Marianne then turns around. Jack is there, sat at his desk, and he's got this big old hole in his head, which I think they say is. He must have had some sort of brain surgery that went wrong, I guess.
Yeah, I assumed he just died of a brain tumor or something.
Yeah,
would be my guess.
Yeah, and he's got a porcelain white mask covering his face.
Yeah, which is consistent with all the dead things, and I'm not sure what that is.
Doesn't really.
Because she finds later on in the game, she starts finding people's mask and giving it back to them, and then she just says their name and they go away.
Yeah.
Which I couldn't. I assume there's some sort of meaning behind that. It just went over my head.
Yeah, especially because I think the only time it's ever really focused upon, other than when you're trying to go find them, is when I think Sadness takes her mask off at some point later on in the game, and then puts it back on again. Yeah. You don't actually see what her face is like, so it doesn't seem to be a construct of Marianne to try and protect herself or anything. It seems like they have agency over their own mask, but for some reason they all have to have one to be sent away. But I guess we're jumping ahead here, but
yeah.
So the screen at this point is now split in two for the first time as well. So we see Marianne in both halves of the screen, one in the office and one in the spirit world. So her movements in both are the same. But on the right side of the screen, she's conversing with Jack in the spirit world. On the left side of the screen, it just looks like she's talking to absolutely nobody. I remember you mentioned to me while we were playing it, sort of chatting while we were both playing on our own, was this wasn't really used as much as we expected, especially considering it's on the artwork and everything.
Yeah, I kept expecting this to be the sort of the gimmick and the thing that this game does is sort of construct its puzzles around the two worlds, and you sort of interacting with them both separately. But I mean, it does do that, but it doesn't do it all that often, to be honest. You can probably count the amount of times it does it on one hand, which I guess is it's a good thing. They don't run it into the ground, I expect, but it's just not utilised in the same way I thought. They make a big deal about in these moments about how, like, sort of there might be obstacles in either the real world or the spirit world that stop you progressing, and you have to deal with it on one side so that both sides can continue on. But then they only use that when it's convenient, because at points they just sort of either put you in the spirit world or in the real world and just ignore the fact that these obstacles seem to exist everywhere, and it's just like, oh well, don't worry about that now because she's not looking. It's like if she just ignores one world, then there's no obstacles. It's only when she tries to do both at the same time there becomes I find that a little bit odd and it just pulled me out a little bit.
They only seem to use this split screen. Well, the only things I can vividly remember with this split screen are all cutscene related. That seems to be their real go-to of when they're going to try and make this work. Every time she's talking to sadness, or when she's at the end of the game
You're right.
Those are the only bits I sort of remember, because most of the puzzles, like you say, you're either switching with mirrors back and forward, and you're just one character at a time, or you've held down B to just be in the spirit world, and then your material world form is basically just having a little sleep, standing up.
Yeah, you're right about that, actually. And yeah, they just seem to like to do it to show you on one screen Sadness had a ball in her hand, and on the other screen the ball was floating about.
Exactly.
That seemed to be the main driving feature of the gimmick, actually.
Yeah.
When you say that.
Yeah. So Marianne keeps telling Jack to rest, and she starts consoling him. He agrees to rest, and he sort of leaves the room with a final goodbye, and then everything goes white, and it appears that she's now helped him cross over, which is apparently what her job is. She helps spirits cross over. This was the first point in the game where I had the little flashing dots bug as well, so I got it nice and early, which drove me mad.
I only got it once. I got it once when I texted you saying I was getting it, and then it went away and never came back, so I got lucky with that. Yeah,
I was kind of glad that you had that happen, because I was worried that my GPU in my Xbox Series X was busted. After Jack has crossed over, the phone rings and a man named Thomas is on the line. He says he knows Marianne and he needs her help. He says he can give her the answers she's been seeking her whole life, convinces her of his legitimacy by recounting the dead girl dream that she's had at the beginning of the game. He says he's at the Neva Resort, and Marianne is the only one who can stop it, whatever it is, and then the credits roll. And that is our introduction to the game over with.
Yeah. I really enjoyed that opening section, actually, and I think the game did a good job of capturing my interest, because design-wise, the Spirit World, I remember seeing it in the lead up to the release, and I was just like, this isn't jiving with me. But when we started playing, I was like, actually, no, there's something to this, and I've been trying to decide when the moment to talk about it was. Probably just now is fine as ever. Like, we have spoken about this privately, but the game feels like a real love letter to like the old Silent Hill and Resident Evil games in a way that I feel like that was discussed even at a meeting in a lot of how they designed the puzzles and the feel and the flow of the game. People have said like let's evoke these games, which I thought was, again, like it's an odd sort of juxtaposition in that this is meant to be the first new game of the new era of consoles, and it's immediately a throwback to like 20 years ago to old games, and but then we spoke about this. It's both a good and a bad thing. Like it does do a good job of feeling like an old Silent Hill game, and walking around slowly around areas like that area when you're in Jack's house is fantastic. And walking around, there's times walking around the Neva Institute where it really does feel extremely atmospheric, spooky, and foreboding in the way that I remember playing Silent Hill 2. But it also brings with it the sort of negative elements of, I guess, like the opportunity to make a love letter to a game like this is to take what made these games good and spruce it up and modernize it to like get rid of the bad things, like the way that it controls, the slow plodding nature of the game, the odd obtuse puzzles. And I feel like this is a love letter, warts and all. So it brings with it both the great foreboding nature, but also brings with it some of the tiringly slow pacing and odd puzzling and weird things that just pull you out of the experience. I don't know how you feel about that, Alex.
Yeah, I don't want to denigrate the work of the studio too much, but sometimes a lot of these things, going back to what you said a minute ago about the design of the spirit world, some of the things, if you're taking an entirely pessimistic view of it, can feel like they're a budgetary constraint rather than a stylistic choice, because the spirit world at first impression is just drab and brown and yellow, and that's basically it.
Yeah.
And she's just got a different skin on with some different hair color. The camera angles, you know, they do give a very atmospheric feel to the game, but at the same time, that with the movement that looks a bit janky, the lack of kind of combat where it's just sort of walking around slowly. I don't know. It's obviously, as you say, I'd like to view it as more of this is a love letter. This is how they grew up playing horror games and what they want to bring back. I just think with maybe a bigger studio or more money or more time, they could have made it, as you say, less warts and all than it actually is, because it hasn't improved upon those things.
It's actually something I always think about. You like when we're talking about the masks before.
Yeah.
Is that a cheap and easy way to sort of flesh out characters without having to put work into lip syncing and like time and money? Yeah. You just slap a mask on them, and then you can have the voice actor come in, and it really doesn't affect anything. It allows you to continue on without investing and hiring people to do these jobs. So I wonder if that's part of it. But I guess that's all I've got to say on that.
And in the world of crunch, maybe this isn't the worst thing in the world that they'd saved themselves time and effort. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
So you make your way over some gates and stuff. You get into the Neva Resort. It's totally abandoned, completely dilapidated. Apparently, this used to be the new centre of the socialist joy and recreation, but it's shut down due to a rumoured Neva massacre. We climb the fence and hop over into the resort grounds, and this is where a ball rolls towards Marianne's feet for the first time. We hear a child's laughter. When she looks up, there's nothing there. The ball is also gone when she looks back down again. And we use insight, and we see some footprints that we begin to follow. This is another thing. Actually, it feels like we're just going to be totally shitting on this game the whole time, but it's not a terrible game by any stretch. But I feel like a lot of the time you get these insight pathfinding methods, like lights are flickering in certain areas, or you've got a trail of moths or footprints. I feel like it's only ever taking you down an incredibly linear path that you only had one option to take anyway. So it almost feels like it doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, do you know the one that I actually enjoyed, to try and give it some praise that it does deserve? I really enjoyed it. There's a moment, we might get to it actually, so maybe I should just shut my mouth, but when you're talking about the game leading you around, I really enjoy it when the game was leading you by lights and flickering lights. I thought that was done really well.
Yeah.
And did a good job. I actually thought that the game does a good job of leading you to places without feeling like you're actually... I think when you sit back and think about it, I remember walking up to the Neva Institute and I was like, oh, there's so many different ways to go.
Yeah.
I don't know which one to do, and I don't want to miss anything. So I ended up... But then when you sort of try and poke and prod at these supposed choices, there actually is only one choice, and it's just trying to create the illusion of choice, I suppose, which I guess it's not a criticism, it just is what it is. But what it did well was pushing you in directions without actually feeling like you're being pushed. Like I always use the example of the Uncharted yellow yellow things to say, oh, you can climb on the wall, and I think it did a good job of like using lighting and just sort of level design to push you in a direction.
Yeah, that's true.
But
actually.
then
maybe I was a bit harsh
you're right. You're right, but you are right in the extent is that it is quite a linear game.
Yeah,
it's a linear game that's trying to make you feel like it's not, and I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with being a linear game.
No, it's linear. It's definitely linear in the way of an old Resident Evil, where you're in this big place with lots of options, but almost none of them are available to you, and it's going to push you through exploration to finding the way you need to go. And actually, when I said sometimes it wasn't needed, you're right. There are moments where it leads you to where you need to go that are very clever. With the lighting especially, I don't know why I mentioned that as a negative, because that's actually using the environment and having to keep the player focused on what's going on around them to find where they go. But I think sometimes when it was just, here's a trail of moths and you're just following this trail around or following footprints, like sometimes it was putting footprints in woods, but there's only one way you can go in the woods and you're basically just going down a footpath. It's kind of like, well, yeah, I was going to go there anyway. But you're right. I was a bit harsh on that there. At this point, there's like an old abandoned fort, and this brings on the split again. And it starts this. This is the first time I think we play both the worlds, material and spirit, at the same time. And it began this trend of every time Marianne is going to start splitting the worlds, she screams, and there's a screech that blasted through my headphones and scared the bejesus out of me the first time. It's just horrific. Because I remember somebody texted me and said, have you got the first big jump scare yet? And I was like, oh, what, you mean every time she flips over and it screams in your ear? It's like, nah, you'll know when it happens. And we will get to that later. But I did not enjoy the screeching when the worlds change over. I must have had my headphones too loud. So this is, as I said, this is where we first start controlling both worlds at once. And I don't actually mind the very simplistic control method of, you use the X button to control the left-hand world and the A button to control the right-hand world. That worked quite nicely, I think. And if you're looking at things, you simply press one of those two buttons and it allows you to focus on the other world. I thought they implemented that in a nice, user-friendly, really easy way to handle.
They did. I would have liked them to explore that a little bit. What I wanted was there to be, like how you press A to interact with spirit world, like you say, X to interact with the real world. I wanted to see more use of that in puzzles, i.e. you can interact with both things. Like, it was very often you press A on the spirit world and there's nothing in the real world to press X on. I would have liked them to build puzzles around that so that you were pressing A and X strategically, but they never did that, which is
it's more like if you're in the spirit world, you'll see like an outline of the item in the material world, won't you? And you realise, I got to come back here the other way around, rather than, as you say, a sort of simultaneous control, which maybe they tested and thought was just too difficult to. Because did you ever try watching both at once? It's impossible.
No, I just ended up watching one or the other.
Yeah. So at this point, we need to get through a metal gate, but we can't do that because the power is out. So we explore the surrounding area, and it leads to this spirit well, which is like a source of light in the spirit world that Marianne can absorb, and she can blast it out, which is a trope they come back to quite a few times. And it usually is for powering up a power box in the material world, which is what it's here for in this sense as well. So this opens the gate in the material world, which we can just kind of walk through. In the spirit world, it's like they always do this sort of thing where it's like a blurry white, it's like you can't see through it, can you? It's just kind of blocked off with almost an invisible wall. So when we're in now towards the front door of the resort, we need to find another way in because it's locked. So this is where I don't think this is actually led by footprints. I can't remember, but you've got like these weird markings in chalk on the car park. I don't know if that was meant to show me anything or not. I couldn't really remember that. But you actually find your way to this rusted out car. You look in the window, you get a screwdriver that you can get from the bonnet if you use your insight to kind of flick it open. Yeah. And then after you grab it, I got shit scared out of me again because the car's horn beeps really loud. Yeah. And then you look back in the window and there's like a insight will show you a little handprint on the horn, but there's nobody obviously in the car.
Yeah, that's one of the. I should stop overthinking it because it's obviously just atmospheric and world building, but it's like which ghost was pushing that horn and why? What were they up to? And also the same with the chalk, the sort of butterfly chalk drawings that you find around the place. Yeah. I'm like, so was Sadness just drawing on chalk? Like, who did that? Like, because there was the incident that made the plate, which we'll get to, emptied out the institute.
Well, we find out about this as we go through the front door. So we find out that definitely did happen. So yeah.
Yes, this big massacre. So like, These chalk drawings, I'm assuming, have been drawn by a ghost. So
yeah, it must be,
is Sadness just like, what are they doing there? Because they wouldn't have been there during the massacre, pre-massacre. Some kids just walking around car parks drawing butterflies.
Yeah, and arrows.
Yeah, so I just think that's an odd thing for a ghost to be doing. But then I guess Sadness used to run about with a ball, so
yeah,
maybe that's what she was up to. And then she ran out of chalk. She moved on to balls.
It's a natural progression in every young woman's life.
Yeah.
So, okay, so this is So when we're inside the resort now, having found out that the massacre does happen, you find some bloodied shoe and you listen to an echo on it, which is another thing they use quite often. You use your insight to find like a little scar in an item and it will play an echo, which David found all of and I didn't, which is really annoying. And this
I wonder which one you missed.
Yeah, I've got no idea. No idea.
I'll never know.
No, I'm never going to play it. It's already deleted off my hard drive. Commitment. So this is another example that David was saying about lighting and whatever. There's a gate towards just past the reception area, and it's got like a torch that's been dropped on the other side, and it's still kind of flickering. So that becomes the immediate focal point of the area, of the reception area. And when you go over to it, it plays like a cutscene where you see somebody else's perspective looking through the gate from the other side at Marianne, and then they sort of knock something over. And the noise scares Marianne. She starts calling out, asking if it's Thomas. And then the reception bell starts ringing. So is that Thomas? I don't think it is it? Because it's not. It can't be Sadness because she's clearly the one ringing the bell.
Yeah, I couldn't figure that out because I'm looking forward to going through this with you because the who was who actually started to confuse me a little bit. Like,
oh, okay. So. A ball then bounces in front of Marianne down a staircase. She goes to reach for it. We enter the spirit world again, and then we see Sadness, this little girl with she's only got one arm. She's got another one of these masks on. She says her name is Sadness and that she lives there. She offers to help us find Thomas on the second floor, but we can't get up there because the stairs that she took to come and see us are broken in the material world. And this is the first sort of puzzle that we have where.
Do we find out how Sadness ends up with having one arm?
No, I guess because I don't even understand how Sadness exists as a ghost. If you skip to the right at the end of the game, that's one thing I don't really get. But it's almost like, lots of these people seem to be rotting away, and maybe Jack's not got anything wrong with his brain. It's just the same as it. I don't know. I have no idea. Unless it's.
I'm assuming they just went for atmosphere. It was just like, this looks scary.
Let's give
her one arm.
She's like the poster child for the horror aspect of the game, isn't she? Really?
Yeah, so. Yeah. Because I assumed when I saw her that something had happened to her during the massacre, but it didn't, did it?
I guess not. No. Did she do the massacre? We'll get to that. So this is the first time now where we have to have an out-of-body experience where you hold down the B button and you just control the spirit world version of Marianne while her material world version stands there. So we use this to take a lift because it was only had the door open in the spirit world. But my question around this is if she could use the out-of-body experience to take a lift that was only working in the spirit world, why didn't she just walk up the stairs that Sadness went up?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm unsure about that.
Yeah. I never actually got to this point. I don't know if you did, but when you're only in the spirit world doing the out-of-body experience, she starts to sort of fade away if you go there too long. You can see
yes,
she's only got half. Did you ever get as far where it actually you ran out of time, or you did it too much, or did you just always go back?
So I did start to run out of time, and I just came back because I didn't want to die because the checkpoint in the game scared the life out of me. So
it's horrible.
Yeah, so I did it. I got very near to dying, and then it was like when we got later on in the game, I actually feel like they sort of just gave up on that because I felt like the period in which I could be away from the body went on quite long eventually. But I don't know if it was just in my head or not. But that first time felt quite short, and then every other time seemed to just extend itself.
I'm really not sure. It's a very good point though. That it feels to me as almost as if the out of body bits towards the end of the game were just really short bits. But there's an achievement for doing it for, 10 minutes in total in the game or something?
Yeah.
Which I also didn't get. So on the second floor, once we get up there, this is where we first get attacked by, and I looked this up, a whisper of moths, apparently is the collective noun. So Marianne then instinctively uses this spirit shield, even though she apparently didn't know she could do it. And again, that's another thing that comes up. Really one of the only sort of things you could even begin to describe as combat or action in the game, where you're just shielding yourself from moths and walking slowly through a big group.
Yeah. Because this is where, and again, maybe I'm overthinking it, but it's like if I was her and I got a call from a man I didn't know and I turned up to where he wanted me to go and it was clearly an abandoned building that is very creepy looking, I was like, no, this isn't safe, I'm going home.
Yeah.
And then she gets attacked by moths and still carries on.
Worse than that, still, I think she does at some point explain that, I'm kind of used to this because I see ghosts all the time. But I think she says something like, when she approaches the Neva resort, she says something like, I can feel an aura here that I've never really felt before. It's really intense or something, which, as you say, should have been maybe an idea to just pack it in. Off you go. But she still makes a lot of quips throughout the game, which is one thing I really did not enjoy.
Oh, you did not like that, did you?
No, because she's either you're scared or you're not. Now, if that was me, as you say, if I was walking around this resort and all this shit's going on, I'd probably have had multiple panic attacks by now and just gone home or passed out. But she's perfectly able to give names to bolt cutters and have a laugh talking to herself. So maybe she's just tougher than we give her credit for.
Yeah, probably. She's obviously far braver than we are.
Yeah.
And far less funny as well.
Yes. Oh, yeah, definitely. We get one of our first instances here of a puzzle where you have these memories that you have to piece together using the analog stick. It's another thing that comes up quite a lot.
When the game turned into the Division.
I don't remember that in the Division.
You don't remember it is exactly that. You basically, it's not, they look exactly the same, but you just go up to them and you press X and then, or square or whatever, and then you hear Greg Miller speak for a bit in the Division.
Really? Greg Miller?
Yeah. Yeah, he was in the Division 1. You go up to one of the spirits things. It's what's called an echo, I think, and then you hear him getting run over by a truck.
Oh, you know what? I think I know what you're talking about now. Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah. They're like orange, right? Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so then we come to eventually the first and probably one of the only actual jump scares in the game, where we find a room which has a hole in a door. You look through it, you can see a bathtub filled with blood, and a trail of blood runs along the floor, and then a face just pops right up in the screen and scares the shit out of everybody. Me, Marianne, you. Horrible. I don't know who that person was. He's not in there when the door opens. You can go in. You can get a razor by draining the blood. But that again is another thing they clearly just put in there for, like, we need a big moment that everyone's going to talk about of being scared.
Yeah.
Feels a little bit cheap, but we're talking about it, and I remember it very vividly. So,
I mean, it worked. It just didn't seem to fit with, like, a lot of the jump scares and a lot of, like, little bits and pieces of the atmospheric building that this game does. When you complete the game, when you know what the story is, looking back on them, it doesn't actually make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It just seems to be there for just because they decided it should have been scary, because it's almost feels like a horror game.
Yeah, because at times it is just like a walking simulator puzzle game.
Yeah.
Like
unsure.
I'd have to see it back, because I can't even really remember what the face looked like. It didn't have a mask on it, so I have no idea who that was supposed to have been.
Oh yeah, because because all the dead bodies have got masks.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't have seen the eyeball. Oh, I've no idea. We shouldn't be thinking about this.
Nah. So this is when, so you get a razor blade from the bath, and that's what we're going to use going forward to cut open flesh doors.
I find those bits odd. I'm not sure what narrative or even gameplay purpose those things. The only thing I could think of is, are they hidden loading screens? That's the only thing I could think of, because I just don't see what point they serve.
And I found it was oddly, you needed to be, like, really specific with your left analog stick movement as well.
Yeah.
sometimes you're holding down and expecting it to work, but you have to like tilt it a little bit to the left and actually get into the grooves of this pre-cut bit that you're slicing through.
Yeah, it was
really needless.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that was about really. I think the game you could have removed them and they would have been fine.
All of a sudden we're inside that worm in Gears of War, chainsawing through its.
Oh yeah.
Or is it Gears 2? It's one of the Gears games where you're inside a worm and you're all using your Lancer chainsaws to cut through bits of it all the time. That's all I could think of when I was doing it. So we do a fair bit of flesh cutting and moth burning in this area, and we eventually find the door to Thomas's office, and we can see that he's a manager at the resort. We get briefly interrupted by sadness, but then we go in the office, and I actually quite liked this part quite a lot. This is where we can open up the casing to a grandfather clock, and the grandfather clock will then change the time in the spirit world as we spin the hands of the clock around, so you can rewind.
I quite enjoyed that section.
Yeah. We're basically trying to find. There's a secret switch that's blocked by a cabinet in the material world, but if you rewind the clock back far enough in the spirit world, you can see the opening, and then you can run through there, and that's when you generate electricity for the switch using the old spirit blast, and then back in the material world you can then open the switch. And then we move on to another puzzle after that, where we are inside this hidden room and we're developing a photo. Did you enjoy learning how to develop a photo?
I actually found it was oddly specific as well, that you had to have dunk the pictures in for certain certain periods of time and stuff, and it was an oddly in-depth process.
Yeah. I remember
I thought it was okay.
Yeah, I kept taking my headphones off to listen to, because I've got a clock that ticks in my room, so I was trying to take the headphones off to listen to the 1, 2, 3. But I found that if you did do it too early, she would just go, "Oh, not enough time," and just put it back in again.
Oh, right, okay, right, okay, yeah, because I never actually pushed at the edges to see how specific it wanted to get. Like, could you leave it too long? Would it let you do that?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do. See if I could just mess it up, and it'd be like, "Oh, bloody hell, it's all dripping and running everywhere." She's, "Oh god." Yeah. But no. Yeah. So it turns out that the photo we're actually developing is of Marianne. It's one of those kind of typical looking over her shoulder spy shots that you get in movies all the time. Clearly from somebody who's stalking her. So once she realizes that a picture is of her, there's a slide projector in the room, and it turns itself on, and then on the screen it shows like some silhouettes, and it looks like there's a little boy or a little child standing on a window looking out, and there's like a man pressed on the other side looking back into the thing.
Yeah.
Now, as I've been reading that out, that makes me think that is young Thomas, and his inner self is on the other side.
Yeah, actually, I think you're right there. Yeah, that's a good shout.
Then the projector then just goes mental and starts rapidly flicking through the slides. The lights go off. We're back in the spirit world, and we get the first interaction with the big bad of the game, the monster. This giant sort of winged female creature. It's talking nervously to itself. It's saying, it's begging us not to look at it. And then eventually it pins Marianne to a wall. She uses this spirit overload to sort of blast it in the face and get it off of her. And then she legs it, and we have this sort of very brief chase sequence while the monster's chasing us, begging us not to leave.
Yes.
I suppose we can get into it now. I was not a fan of any of these sections. I don't like this in games in general, but I was not a fan of this monster chasing bits.
No, I used to dread the monster coming
Me too.
along. Like, to get the sort of positives out the way isn't the right words, but like the bit I did like about the monsters, I really found the voice acting really creepy and well done.
Yeah,
I enjoyed the way they had made the voice actor sound and the way the voice actor played the part. That was excellent. But the actual gameplay of the monster, I despised it. It was good because like if you got caught, you got forced to watch the same sequence of her, like from beginning of the game to the end. Every time you got caught, it was exactly the same. Pick her up by the throat.
Yeah.
In darkness, the monster says the same thing, and then it puts you back probably a bit too far from what you wanted to be put back from. And I also found there were sections where I was dying and I wasn't sure why I was dying.
Yeah.
And then it just wasn't fun because it was so slow and arduous to navigate around.
I don't know if I've mentioned it yet, but this is where I feel like if this game had actual combat in it, I would have really enjoyed it if this game gave you maybe some smaller enemies to fight back against. Basically just like Silent Hill. It doesn't need to be Resident Evil with all your guns out and stuff. You can just have a means to hit them and get away from them rather than just constant instant death scenarios where you're just having to, because one comes up after this. So we get into a room with a spirit well, the monster then dissipates because obviously you can't handle light or something, and then in the next room he returns again, and this is when we have to start sneaking past, sort of just ducking down behind something and pressing the right stick in to hold your breath.
That mechanic is just thrown at you, and I don't think the game makes any effort to explain how it actually works. I just used to do it when the monster came near, and that was it.
Especially as you can hold your breath indefinitely. There's no penalty to just holding it down. She doesn't run out of breath or anything.
No, because I was expecting, I was holding it for a while once because the monster was right next to me, and I was like, do I need to let it go? Is she going to gasp when I let go and the monster's going to find her? I couldn't figure out how that was used, and yeah, it was odd. I don't think the game did a good job of explaining itself at all with the breath holding.
I'd even argue actually that it does it almost tricks you with the way that it explains it, because I think I said it to you on one of the load screens or something after I died or somewhere like that. The game definitely said you can hold your breath and then the monster will eventually give up on search and leave. But there was one point, it might even be this bit, where he just doesn't leave. He just keeps doing his patrol route in a circle. And I thought, you told me he's going to leave. So at that point, you realise, okay, I'm going to have to just try and make my way out. Very weird. So
that was also the point where I started to realise that the game sort of arbitrarily decides when you can and can't go fast. Like the speed of the character is all over the place. Like even the running changes speeds. Like if you're in quiet areas, she seems to be able to tear about like a madwoman. But then if she's getting chased and murdered by a ghost or whatever, she can't run as fast.
Yeah,
because
Thomas is even worse.
At her fast, it's an odd. And then at the end of the game, there's another bit where you actually have to outrun the ghost. You've got to use your spirit to sort of distract the ghost and then zoom back to your body to run away. She can tear about then, but then in the first sequence with the monster, you can't run fast at all. It's all over the place.
Yeah, it is. I had loads of bugs where sometimes it just wouldn't let me run at all. I think sometimes if you're on higher levels or whatever, it just won't let you run. And speaking of higher levels, there's a bit here where after the stealth section, she sort of sidles along this ledge, and then moths knock her to the floor, and she wakes later on to find herself back at the reception. Another ball rolls by on the stairs, and this is where you get the radio starts flickering through messages to tell you to go to the day room. So like Sadness is fucking around the radio.
Sadness becomes Bumblebee from Transformers.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and it says to find Richard. That's right. And this is where we get the flickering lights, where Sadness is like flicking the lights on to try and tell you. She's trying to show you something about Richard. We also get a lot on the way there of these weird postcards from the groundskeeper. Is it Francis or Frank? Apparently he was he was kept on by Thomas once Neva shut down. It's never really explained why this guy was absolutely mental on writing postcards to somebody who may or may not exist that he definitely never sent.
Yeah, I just think... Yeah, I'm not sure. It was almost like... I'm trying to remember what I took from it. I assume that he was kept on at Neva even after it closed because the owner just knew he was a bit of a tragic character with alcohol problems, and he had lost his family in some regard, probably because of his alcoholism. And then I just assumed he was writing these postcards to try and keep up a pretense that he was in contact with his family. Yeah. And also it sort of double-sided as a form of catharsis or therapy for the guy to try and process things that he had done because of his problem. Yeah,
I don't know if later on we find out that Thomas kept him there because Thomas knew he was already dead and he's writing these postcards spirit world side. I guess we'll come back to that. I must have made notes about it. I can't.
Oh yeah,
really...
could be because well, there is a postcard in there or a letter, sorry, that you find where Thomas says in a note that he's like, I know you're not sending these postcards,
Yeah,
so why
that's
are you
right.
even pretending?
Yeah, yeah. He says there's lots of stuff where he's sort of writing, feeling sorry for him, and poor old Frank had to use him and all this kind of stuff. In a nearby hallway towards the end, we get our first glimpse of the fabled, infamous bolt cutters, and they're just out of reach. So on your way back, there's a mirror.
Just climb, just reach, just climb and reach. I mean, that's
it's typical video game gatekeeping there. Just most people would just climb up and get them. So as we're walking back, we see Sadness in this mirror, and we can see our spirit world form behind her as our reflection. So as we reach towards the mirror, it cracks, and this is when we get one of these spirit trails, which is basically like little butterflies that we have to follow. We eventually follow, and we get to a locker with a cat figurine in it, and that figurine then allows us to touch another mirror, and then this is when we begin to switch using mirrors from material world to the spirit world, which, as we discussed earlier, is what it seems to do a lot more often than when they both just simultaneously on the screen.
Yeah.
So while we're in the spirit world, this is where we hear a child crying out for his mum. We find a corpse. It's got no bottom half. It's got a face caved in. It's strung up on a wall. So as we've been making our way here to this mirror, we've been looking at echoes in this sort of swimming pool area, and we've heard about this child called Bernard, and this is apparently who is strung up on this wall, and we have to try and send his spirit away. And this is where we get the mask finding quest. So we do a lot more skin door cutting. We've got some moth shielding. I didn't find this necessarily... See, this is where I started to feel slightly disappointed in some of the puzzles, where it really is just a case of use very basic tools and techniques and just walk into a different room and get what you need and come back.
Yeah, and it's also to the point that it is so... I don't know if it was just poor puzzle design or if the developers are so worried that you might accidentally miss something. But it would have you walk past an area, like say like you were in an area and you died before the start of a puzzle and you knew that you had to walk past something to pick it up. It wouldn't let you engage with the item until you had gone and triggered the stuff in the other room. So like if you were for example, the only one I'm jumping a bit, but the only one that's jumping to mind is when you're in the underground bunker towards the end of the game and you're rounding up glass shards. You might know where those glass shards are, but you cannot interact with the glass shards until you've gone through and found that you need to go, find the broken mirror.
Yeah. Weird.
And stuff like that. And there's bits where the game would like purposely make you backtrack. And in a game that if you'd already died or you'd already been put back for some reason, like the game would crash, like it did for me a couple of times.
Yeah.
The game's slow, but it doesn't. It almost forces you to continue to be slow. You can't sort of speed it up in any way. Just thinking, right, I've seen this bit. I'm just going to collect this stuff and deal with it when I get there, which is a shame.
Yeah, I mean, the greater point about the checkpointing that we touched on earlier is that I don't have any idea why the game seems to put its checkpoints behind or in front of cutscenes that are unskippable. There were so many moments where I would have died in an action sequence that had followed on from a cutscene, and every time I died, it made me watch the cutscene again. I don't understand why it's not the other side of that and just get you straight back into the action. It seems really like antithetical to how a checkpoint should actually work. And
yeah, totally.
Speaking of dying, this is, if I had a bell here, I could ring it every time we get a Resident Evil or Silent Hill rip-off. So ding ding. Getting a key item in this game alerts every monster in the universe. So every time you get something or find something to progress, the monster's going to get pissed off because he somehow knows you've got it. And here he comes. We put the mask on the wall. After we've got it, we stick it back on Bernard's face. We send him away. That then makes the wall he was on dissipate, and we can walk through. We get a black cat figurine now. So we've got a white one and a black one. So the black cat figurine works the exact same way, just allows us to go back from the spirit world to the material world using mirrors. So as we're going back to the mirror to get out of this is when the monster then chases us again. I think this was almost just another corridor sort of running around thing. It wasn't a stealth section, thank Christ.
Yes.
But once we get into the material world, we think we're safe from the monster, but we're not, because now he shows up in the material world in a cloaked form, which makes it the stealth section even less fun than it was the first time around. Where you're just kind of trying to watch for like a wobbly bit of light while you hold your breath for ages. None of these were even that long. Normally they're only 1 or 2 bits and then it's over, but they just felt excruciating. And as you said earlier, it made you dread the monster, but not in the way that you should be. You weren't scared of the monster. You were just dreading that it's going to ruin your progress.
Again. Yeah.
I mean, maybe if they did...
and also, like, it didn't have... We're probably spoiled by the Resident Evil 2 remake, but he didn't have the sort of foreboding, he could pop up at any time feeling that, is it Mr. X in the Resident Evil 2 would have, because he was actually in the game. It was so obvious when you were safe and when you weren't safe.
Yeah, totally.
Which is a bit of a shame.
Yeah.
It never felt like there was this predator sort of prowling the area. It was just, he's in this section. Once you're out of it, you can make as much noise as you want.
Yeah.
And he won't come.
And he won't show up until you hit this key event that we want you to hit. So if you don't do that, you're absolutely fine. We then go into once we've escaped him again, there's another mirror. We go back to the spirit world. There's 2 corpses this time without masks. So we need to help send both of those away again. The first one is a man. I can't remember what his name is. This is a puzzle where we have a list of attendees in a conference room. And it shows all these names. We've got to find the right ones. The names have got this numerical order. The chairs in the room have numbers on them. So we have to listen to echoes from ashtrays and stuff nearby to find out. It's Boris. That's who we're looking for, Boris. So we need to find out where he was sitting. So he complains about somebody he has to sit opposite. And this goes back to what you were just saying a minute ago, where I found this one really disappointing, because once you'd found something, like once you'd found the right chair or whatever, to do this, you couldn't just use your brain and then go and do the puzzle. What you had to do was find the chair that's the right one, click on the chair so that Marianne then announces out loud that, this is his chair. Then you would go back to the list of attendees, and then suddenly on that list, an X appears next to the right person.
That's a great example, That's when I solved the puzzle before the puzzle knew. So I'd worked out what it wanted me to do, went and did it, and then had to go back to all the chairs again.
Yeah.
Because I hadn't pressed X at the right point.
Yeah, and I thought that's what you were going to bring up when you were talking about that earlier. I just thought that was really
No, I totally blanked on
puzzle.
that. That's a much better example than mine.
Yeah, so I assume the reason that you've had to go back and do this is because once you've figured it out, you've got the right chair, then the monster comes out again. And this is when we're again doing a stealthy bit. We can eventually get back to the spirit world. It's the guy's name is Nicholas. Sorry. So Nicholas was upset that he was sat opposite Boris. That's right. So you find Boris's seat, you go opposite. That's right. And blah, blah.
Yeah.
So we send Nicholas away, and then we're on to the second mask. And this is the bit where we have to go into this exam room, and we need to find a key for it. And it has a spirit trail as well. So this is one of the worst puzzles I think I've ever seen, where the exam room door is there. There's like a cabinet outside the door, and on the floor next to the cabinet is the key. Once you pick up the key, you get a spirit trail that leads you 2 yards to the door that you were just stood in front of. Like, why even bother with that? Why not just have the door be allowed to be opened? I mean, I don't know about you, but I basically would walk around most of the time holding the insight button down.
It did become a little bit Batman Arkham Asylum detective mode, where you just had it on all the time in case you missed something.
Yeah. We get more monster stuff here. This is really overused in this bit. So we get another puzzle now to find the second person's name, because Marianne needs a name to be able to send them through to the spirit, to let them pass on or whatever. There's loads of insta-death moments in this bit before we get to the final room.
I like the way she announces their names, because she's like having a normal conversation. She's like, here's your mask back. I hope you have time to move across to the next world. Boris. Yeah. Like, it's such a weird way to say it. Just
they're always like, cheers. Thanks, Marianne. Bye.
It's like a big grand reveal of his name that you already know.
Yeah. Whereas this puzzle here, it tries to play a little bit of misdirection with the name, because she's a ballerina. She's called Vivienne, but Marianne figures out that that's a stage name, and we have to go through. Oh yeah, because you end up in her manager's room, don't you? And he's got like a little glory, or rather a peephole, where you can like look through at her getting dressed.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of like swapping between the spirit world to go grab her mask, but we need to find her name. So this is where you go into her room.
The bizarre bit where she's got a different name, and she's like talking about, oh, your name isn't just your name, it's what you feel or something. I was like, what is this?
Yes, because her name... So I did this the wrong way round. So this is another puzzle where once you find the answer, it then becomes a clickable button on the game. So I think I just figured it out immediately. So you've got like an address book next to a phone, and you can use echoes to kind of go and listen to all the numbers. You can call all the numbers in.
And then her mum uses her real name, and she's like, don't call me that, I don't like it.
Yeah, so her name's Victoria, but she doesn't like it. But I didn't realise that until I think I just rang the right number first, and then I went back and listened to the other 3 numbers and was like, oh, this was actually supposed to lead me to the answer, but I figured out the answer immediately. So her name is Tori, because you have to find some scraps of paper to make the address book whole, and you call the right number, and that's how you can trace a call back to Ellie, where you can figure out then, okay, she's obviously not Ellie, this person is Tori. So then you go back, stick the mask on her, say, bye, Tori. And she says, cheers, Marianne. See you later. And we finally get the bolt cutters.
Which are then with us for the rest of the game. They really go all in on the bolt cutters.
Yeah, and I couldn't figure out how to use them at first as well, because you've got to squeeze both your triggers as if you're squeezing each handle of the bolt cutters. Briefly before we use the bolt cutters you can take some shortcuts to get back to the day room and finally enter it, because it's been barred this whole time with a chain. I imagine most people would just kick the door open and climb over the chain, but whatever. We get an echo at this point. We can listen to. It's like one of those memories that you kind of rewind, where we get it's on a wheelchair, and this is where we hear about this murderous nurse. Who seems to be the one who did all the massacre. But do you know who the nurse is meant to be, or why she did any of this? It's not actually Sadness, is it? She wasn't the nurse there.
No, I assumed so. This monster came about for reasons we'll get to, but and then it was able to utilize a sort of internal latent evilness in this nurse which then brought the monster was able to use as a vehicle to act in the way it did. So it was half the nurse being a bit of a bad person, half being controlled by this monster, is what I took from that.
It's weird as well, because when it's described as a massacre, you expect some kind of like bloody, horrendous spree of kills, but it almost seems as if the nurse was
especially because there's opened up and abandoned suitcases and stuff like there had just been an absolute like gun show going on at some point. Blood splattered up the wall, but it was just a nurse stabbing folk with a little scalpel.
Yeah, I did. Oh, I didn't even realize that she was doing that. I thought she was just giving them injections and stuff, but she must have been cutting them up, because there's blood all over as you say, all over the swimming pool and stuff. We enter the day room finally. This is where Sadness returns. The screen splits again. So Sadness is convinced at this point that the monster's going to eat Marianne. I actually quite liked this cutscene, because this is the bit you touched on earlier, where Marianne gives the ball back to Sadness, and for some reason the developers just give themselves a massive circle jerk by having like Sadness like chuck the ball about, roll it around, do like between the legs alley-oop to Shaq at the hoop, and it's all like, but in the material world it's just a ball floating about while somebody talks to themselves. But that was quite cool. But again, it's more of a memorable moment in the cutscene than it has been in any of the gameplay so far. So we mention, I think Marianne mentions Richard at this point, and that makes Sadness really upset. She says a bad thing happened to him, and she doesn't want to see him again, and she runs away. And this is where we sort of get introduced to Richard as a character. We find a lot of these notes from this mentor, which I believe is Richard himself writing these notes, because he discusses some young person with a gift that sounds like madness. To me, that was Richard sort of talking about Thomas, who has this special gift. I think we find out later as well that Thomas is the reason that Richard came to Neva. Doesn't he make him come visit or come stay there with him? I think Richard must lose. He must be on loan.
Richard gets sacked from the university he worked at.
Yeah, that's
for being a creepy dude, I think, but it's unclear at that point why. So Thomas invites him to come and work at this Neva Institute.
That's right.
With children with gifts, special children.
Yes, that's it. We have another little cool puzzle here where we've got an incomplete globe, and when you find the right piece for it, you can spin the globe in the spirit world, and that rotates the rooms. So we've had to find some sheets of music, put them on a piano. That then fills up a spirit well that we can use to head through a area that's guarded by moths. They do this a couple of times as well, don't they? Where you've got a spirit well and you go up to it and she says, "Oh, there's not enough light in it to absorb."
Yeah.
And effectively, what you're doing is a puzzle in the material world to then make this spirit well fully form in the spirit world. And this is where we go down some stairs, and then in the spirit world, there's just these giant shadowy hands waving around outside a big window. If you remember that.
Oh yeah,
she sits in front of this big window. And we get some memories as well of Richard being a bit of a pedo, drawing little girls and stuff. And then,
which I think at that point I wrongly assumed Richard was the monster, but he's a different monster. He's sort of the big monster, isn't he?
Well, he's the waving hands outside the window, but he's not the monster that's chasing you.
Yeah, which is different. I think I assumed at that point they were both one and the same, but they're not, obviously.
Yeah, the monster's definitely more of like an aggressive paedophile, whereas Richard seemed to be like one of those pathetic ones. So this is then a wheelchair rolls over to Marianne and she sits in it, and then it allows this first vision that we get of Thomas. He's clearly distressed. He's searching for something. He keeps saying he's failed you. And then there's another version of him, which is clearly like this manifestation of his own madness or a spirit. I don't really know what it's supposed to represent, but it's this other part of him. It's on another side of a glass door, and it starts taunting him and talking shit to him. He eventually finds a hole in a wall behind a picture, and it's got a book in it, and he says page after page is full of her, and it's like he's obsessed, and he asks how could he do this to her. So his other self then tells him to just let him do what he does, and Thomas says, yeah, you better do that, because if you don't, I'm going to kill him. I don't know if this is because, have you seen the Netflix shows Haunting of Hill House and Haunting of Bly?
Yeah.
Have you seen both of them? Have you seen The Haunting of Bly Manor? So I'd only just finished watching this with my wife, and it just made me think immediately about the uncle of the little kids in Bly Manor who's got that evil. He's exactly that. He's got this bad side of him that's just giving him shit and be like, oh, you're pathetic and all this sort of stuff. So
I guess like that's, I kind of started to realize, so there's, in the spirit world, there's like, it's almost like they can break off different parts of their personality to sort of, so like the paedophile part of, is it Richard's personality is the big sorry monster that wants you to do away with him, and they almost, and then the same, I'm assuming Richard, is it Richard? No, Thomas, that is just a violent side of his personality that he's sort of pigeonholed away and tries to ignore.
Yeah, that's right.
Because Marianne never has conversations with her spirit self. They seem to be one and the same.
Yeah, I suppose that's what differentiates her gift, I suppose, that she can control it.
Yeah.
And it's just, she's in full control of both aspects of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
We then get like this POV shot where we are seeing the point of view of Richard. He returns home and he sees Thomas in his house, and Thomas then starts accusing him and asking why he's sketched his daughter on every page of this book, and asks if he hurt her. Richard says he has a thing inside of him that made him do it, and he wants to die. Thomas then grabs Richard by the head, so you see him straight up in the screen. He screams to Richard to let him in, and this is where we first start to control Thomas's other self, and we're inside Richard's world, and we need to free him from his demon. I did not expect to be controlling another character in this game. I've got to be.
No, surprised by that. And yeah, they go on an interesting arc with this other character that.
Yeah.
It feels, in the way that Marianne feels vulnerable. There's quite a power with Thomas, and like because he's one that can actually like you can use your shield to kill things in that world, like those little
Dark
technical
Souls
arms
parry.
and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And it felt oddly. I found it, and I don't know if it was deliberate or not, because I feel like they don't actually follow through with it, but he was I found him quite ominous, like the slow, deliberate way in which he walked. And if you could walk in time, killing those things without stopping or breaking your stride, so you'd be walking through the corridor, these things would try and get you, and you just kill them and keep walking and not actually stop or move. And I find like this guy's he's quite he felt like quite a cold and dangerous character in the way that Marianne didn't.
Yeah, which was interesting that we get to sort of control him, because at this point he still seems like he's potentially the villain of the piece.
Yeah, that's what I was getting from it. I was like, oh, does he become the monster?
Yeah.
Because there was something that reminded me of it. But yeah, he would go in and he was quite a vicious. There was a couple of things he said which made me think that he was actually the monster.
Oh, okay.
And now I'm blanking on it.
I think his character design in the spirit world, I actually quite enjoyed that. He did look like kind of a badass, whereas Marianne's is just like herself, but she looks almost warmer with the white hair, and she's glowing because of the color of the world, whereas he is just this straight up like grey. It's almost like a zombie,
because they were using like red, and they were using reds and stuff. As like where Marianne's force field is white and pure, his was quite red and foreboding, and which again like played into what made me think he was a bad guy.
Yeah, I didn't even cop that, but you're right, it is a different color. So in this whole section, we're going to learn about the youth and the upbringing of Richard, and maybe why he ended up this way. Later on in the game, it actually plays quite a nice twist on this. But at this stage, I did think this was a little bit rote in terms of like, look at how abused he was as a kid, and this is why he's a dirty pedo. But they do play with that a little bit later. So there's a dilapidated house. It's got tentacles all around it. And the giant hands are kind of near the house. They're kind of almost like surrounding it. We see like a little boy run out of a doorway once we get in the house, screaming to someone to leave her alone. We find this knife on the floor, and we hear Richard's mum's voice saying to bring it to father. So for some reason, Thomas decides to play along with this charade and take it up the stairs. We get this twisted corridor with tentacles everywhere. It's got loads of fog, portraits with scratched out faces, peeled off wallpaper. I quite liked that aesthetic. And you get to the end of the corridor, and it kind of stretches further out into the distance, and you're almost continually chasing it. And it gives a lot of exposition as we're doing this. So every time you get there and it expands itself, we hear more stuff about Richard's dad went away to join the army. We finally get to his study. And then there's a letter in the fireplace that talks about his dad dying. We then get this grief and anger that apparently manifests a coffin behind Thomas or Richard, or whoever we're supposed to be at this point. We charge the spirit from that. I believe he says he can channel the grief and anger to charge his spirit, and that's how we blast away these tentacles that are blocking our exit. This is where we emerge outside in this garden maze area, which this is one of the areas that was the running speeds that you talked about earlier was most prevalent for me, where Thomas really just has like this listful jog through this maze. It isn't really a maze, but I still got lost in it anyway.
Yeah.
There's loads of like, you can hear him talking, like young Richard talking with this girl. Is it Rose? They're all like chasing each other and hiding and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I think once you're done that with that maze, you hear a memory of Richard's mother talking about her new husband. She says something like, "Oh, he's here to protect us now," or something. And so now we're back in the house, and this time we're conversing with Richard's stepdad, who's I think is supposed to be. There's like a tentacle over a chair, which is supposed to symbolize Richard's stepdad sitting in this chair, and he keeps making us go and get stuff and like verbally abuses us for getting the wrong thing. I actually don't remember what the thing is we're supposed to get for him.
Because
it's not a beer.
It's not a beer. Yeah, because there was the first thing that Richard brings his stepdad is actually ridiculous. Because even I was like bringing it, and I was like, this isn't what he's wanting, and I know it. It was something really stupid, and I can't remember what it was. I just remember thinking,
Is there a book? I know you can get a photo of his actual dad.
Oh
his
yeah,
mum,
that's it. The
wedding
first
photo.
one, you give him a photo of your actual dad. He's like, this is definitely not what he's looking for.
Yeah, what I want to see a picture of that.
Here, child, bring me a picture of my wife's old husband.
Yeah, and I'm surprised you didn't want a beer. To be fair,
Yeah, I thought he was wanting
he
that.
just says, "What, am I an alcoholic? Get that shit out of here." But basically, once you've given him the thing he wants, or maybe you never give him what he wants, and he just verbally abuses you until he attacks you, and then you just block it.
He tries to attack you, and you block it, and then you have to run away from him. I think, or at least Thomas does.
Yeah, so I don't think
Richard,
we do ever.
Sorry.
Yeah. This time we then, once we've blocked it, we can then pass where that was, and we end up back in the garden at a different time now. We hear voiceover as we're walking through the garden maze at nighttime, where it's recounting a scene where we discussed this, but we don't really know what happened. I think it was that Richard's mum was obviously being abused by his stepdad, so she then grasps him up to the Nazis, I think, for hiding Jews in the basement. Yeah,
so there was Jews around. So it turns out that girl is Jews, and there's other Jews, and you find a letter that says that they come out, that they are allowed out at night, and that if you want to catch them, this is the best time to find them. It's not clear. This is a bit I think we couldn't figure. It's not clear who's hiding them, because the stepdad doesn't strike me as someone that is compassionate enough to be hiding people from the Nazis.
Exactly. So it was like Richard's mum was hiding them, and then then blamed it on the dad. Yeah, or maybe his original dad was. I don't know, and then they're still there. The stepdad doesn't know, but either way, it gets the stepdad out of the house apparently. Anyway.
Yeah.
Then at this point, after we've heard that, we then finally get out of the maze, and we've got this long stretch towards the big hulking demon in the distance. Mm-hmm. And in front of the monsters, this figure, it's got tentacles sort of encased around it. So we use a blast of light, we free Richard from it. Thomas starts confronting him, and Thomas says that as long as the child version of Richard is here in the spirit world, then the beast will always come for him. So he presses his hand to Richard's head, and then the child disappears. And this is where we return back to Marianne, and she's still in the wheelchair. The giant demon is staring at her through the window, and she realizes that the big monster is Richard. The monster then says, "This is what's left of me." He claims that Marianne can set him free and save him. She refuses, but Richard just says he just doesn't want to exist anymore. So she relents. She allows him to pass on, and then as he's flickering away, he mentions she's the girl from the red house. I thought this bit was pretty good, I guess.
Yeah. I actually find, although I couldn't figure it out, and I saw it coming, the unfolding bit about the Jews, and I enjoyed that wee story about him playing. I enjoyed it, like him playing with the kids and not realizing what was happening, and then sort of his friends being taken away.
Yeah,
as well as his dad and stuff like that, and you can I quite enjoyed that whole section.
Yeah, I mean, some of the symbolism was a little bit obvious. You know, you've got rose bushes burning and lilies burning and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. But you awake in the spirit world, don't you? That's when you get rid of him, and then you awake again in the material world, still in the wheelchair. And she finds this girl, a picture of a girl taken at Neva, and realizes that it's her. And then she says she can feel the red house in the woods calling out to her. So. Then she really slowly starts jogging through the woods, and we get a doggo friend, which is
nice. And I was like, if you kill this dog,
I
can't obviously stop because we're doing this for a podcast. But under normal circumstances, I'd be out. Leave the dog alone.
Mercifully, they do. He eventually leads us to this tent, and he starts barking, and then somebody in the tent says that they're sorry. Does all this expositional stuff. Asks why did he stay and let it out, and says they're all dead because of him. And then he says he can see us, which means that it can see us too. We open the tent, and it's got a dead man who sort of seems rotted out from the inside. He's got this
I'm assuming he committed suicide. Yeah, he's suffocated himself.
Yeah,
which is tough to do. Like you.
Yeah.
Like it'd be like akin to me. I imagine akin to it's like impossible for a man to drown himself. You know, like even if you want to commit suicide, you stick your head in water.
Yeah.
You just can't do it.
Yeah, you just sort of habitually
you
float
just pull
back
your head up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously we realised that this was Francis, the groundskeeper. He's got his final postcard on the floor next to him.
Yeah.
And of course, now we've found something key exposition. The monster's back, cloaked again because we're in the material world. And this is where he starts to get this voice acting with the freaky dialogue that you were talking about earlier, where he says all this stuff about he wants to wear us and he wore Francis, but he wore him out. Really creepy, sort of messing with the voice.
Refers
tones.
to you as a skin suit, yeah. Which again sort of leads back to when we were talking about the nurse. So this demon can sort of possess, not like possess and not in the literal term, but also almost
you're like a host for it, aren't you?
Feed negative parts of your personality, and pull them out. And then he wears them out because they do they're not strong enough to survive just with the pure evil. So they eventually die, which is I'm assuming what happened to that guy, what happened to the nurse. And it's why the monster's drawn to evil parts, because it's that's how it sort of exists in the real world, or uses it as a vehicle to manifest itself.
Yeah, and it seems to just be sort of like a metaphor for negative aspects of people's personalities, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got a nurse whose duty is to care for people, but you do hear stories about nurses becoming sort of having this bloodlust. This guy was clearly an alcoholic. He may have been abusive to his wife. That's why she never wants to see him again. We're not sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think when the monster's running after us, this is the bit where the game, you're running through the woods and it seems to sporadically flicker back and forth between the material world and the spirit world. And sometimes you'll have a tree fall in front of you and then it sort of flicks to the spirit world to get rid of the tree to allow Marianne to get her escape.
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing that as part of the initial trailers, I think. And I remember thinking at the time when I saw it, oh, that's cool if you can do that. You get to flick between the worlds to kind of save yourself. But no, it's just all...
It's another one of those slightly frustrating parts about the game. As a visual exercise and a visual sort of set piece, it works really well and it's really nice and engaging. But when you then link it back to the other parts of the game, like i.e. they use puzzles to stop you getting through doors because your real life, flicking into the spirit world, if you're to carry that game logic on, the tree's still there in the real world, yet it's not an obstacle in this instance, even though both physical and spirit person are running in the same place.
Yeah.
Which I find quite annoying. But as a visual piece, it's good.
Yeah, there's no indication that this is a simultaneous running from both of them, isn't it? It's almost like she's completely embodying one and then back to the other. Yeah.
Exactly. Which then, like what I was saying before, throws in the face when you're not able to go through doors as a ghost because in the real world there's a door there. Yeah, doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and she has to use a mirror to switch between the things, but at this point it just happens. At the end of this section where she's making her escape, we find some ruins. She jumps across this breaking bridge, and then the monster that kind of shakes him off for now. So we have to try and get through these ruins to get to the other side, and we start seeing visions and hearing the voice of Jack, which was probably should have been the most expected part of the game to happen later on after the very beginning. At some point, someone's going to use Jack to try and unsettle Marianne.
Yeah.
What comes up next is you're in this sort of tunnel bit, and it brings on one of the most frustrating and annoying parts of the game for me, where you're walking around this tunnel corner. The monster then busts through this brick wall. You run away from it, and you have to run, and then there's I don't even know what it is. It's like something with handles on it, a really heavy thing that she has to... Well, I thought I had to push it and move it to the left or the right.
Yeah.
To block him off. But even at that stage, when I pressed X on the thing to try and grab it, it wasn't working. She wouldn't grab it. And I kept dying because the monster would just break through the wall and kill me.
Oh, yeah.
But what you actually have to do, I think, is pull it so that the wall then breaks, because it's obviously holding the wall up, which I totally didn't get. But I think I died about 3 or 4 times. And this is another point where the checkpointing really pissed me off, because it forced you back to a walking section, and I didn't know why.
Does it? Oh, no.
So I'd always have to keep walking back to that bit, go past all the bits of Jack, and then get into this tunnel, and then start the running bit. And I don't know why it didn't start from the running section. But after
that's an odd one.
After we get through that, this is where we have to find this lever for a gate and some gas for a generator. And as we're searching around for this, we're sort of up high, and the monster's walking below us, talking shit about us, talking about wearing us, talking horrible things about Jack. We find a screwdriver eventually, which is another one of our tools. This is where we can open the gate, put the gas in the generator, turn it on, push it into the water, and that fries the monster. And Marianne kind of realizes at that point that the monster can't handle being electrocuted. Surprisingly.
Yeah, I assumed that what that was going to be when you filled up and fixed the generator, that because the monster doesn't like the sort of electricity that she can use, and it seems to be electricity seemed to have given off the same thing. That was going to be like a safe beacon, and you'd push it forward, have to leave to do something and get back to it. But no, she just straight up electrocutes it.
Yeah,
she doesn't seem to like.
So yeah, after we've electrocuted the monster, the world splits again. And this is where we see Sadness on a swing. And Marianne reveals to Sadness that she knows her name was Lily. She knows what Richard did to her, but she sent Richard away now. And now she's saying that Sadness should be able to leave. She can send her away.
Yeah.
Sadness obviously refuses to let Marianne send her away and says she can't leave yet. And says she's not afraid of the monster because all it wants is Marianne. And she tells Marianne she has to remember the dream, the fire, and the red house. And this begins our search towards finding this house now. We first come up to this small shack that's got another sort of puzzle in it where you have to, again, use a generator. This is the one where you have to stand next to it in the material world with Marianne and then switch to the outer body experience, run all the way up, climb up onto the roof, turn it on, and then switch back.
Yeah,
because it powers out if you don't do it quickly enough. We approach then the red house. She says its spirit is still burning and we can't get in, and there's some reconstruction of kids in cages and a man burning the house down before we move on to our second Thomas flashback. But that's a pretty dark moment right there.
Yeah, that's a dark one.
So we're again now looking at Thomas. He's breaking open this briefcase and he finds out that whoever's briefcase it is this security service agent, and then he gets attacked from behind. And again, we then go to the POV of the other person. We find out is a man named Henry, the guy who attacked Thomas. Thomas is tied up in a chair. So Henry tells him that he knows that Thomas took revenge on Richard because of what happened to his daughter, and he knows he has the powers of a medium to do it. He says he wants Thomas to tell him about his powers. Thomas tells him to earn it and goads Henry into hitting him. So Henry punches him in the face, knocks Thomas out. We then see later on Henry wakes Thomas up, spins his chair around and shows Thomas the fact that the house is burning. He says to Thomas that they're still in there and asks Thomas if he's going to show him his powers now. And then Thomas enters his mind in an attempt to save himself, enters Henry's mind in an attempt to save himself and save his burning family. Quite a cool switch that, again, I did not expect to happen. I feel like Thomas's moments in this game are probably more interesting than some of Marianne's.
Yeah, you're right. Probably is. Perhaps it's just because when you get him, you're actually getting some sort of resolution to the questions that the game raises. Maybe that's why. But yeah, you're right.
I think and maybe I preferred him as a character. He's not making quips as he walks around all the time and just sort of having a bit of a lardy-dar all the time. I didn't actually enjoy this bit all that much, so we're inside the mind of Henry now, and it starts off with this mindscape that's full of sort of mountainous filing cabinets and papers stacked really high. You somehow get Jedi force powers where you can hold X to just knock things out of the way and push them around. Yeah.
Which again fed into the fact that I assumed at some point he was going to become the monster, because he seemed to be messing with people's bad side and gaining power, and I was like, oh, he's eventually going to become the monster.
That's a good point.
But no, he didn't.
Nope.
Spoiler.
We hear a loud scream. Thomas says he's not alone, and there's a giant creature that passes in the distance, sort of stomping and snarling around. It's kind of like a dog, but like a hell dog sort of thing. I don't really know what it's supposed to look like.
It was like a T-Rex with a human skull head or something as well. It was really odd.
Yeah. It does have tiny little arms, doesn't it? But it's walking around on all fours and, really weird looking. We get into an interrogation room mixed with this slaughterhouse abattoir area. oh god, this next bit is like it reminded me of that bit in a Batman Arkham Asylum where you've got the Scarecrow sections, and all it is loads of pig carcasses strung up on the ceiling, and a beam of light just will be emanating from holes in these bits while a guy tells you to come here, and you have to try and sort of walk around and not get seen by the light. I really, really didn't like this bit. I don't know why it was there. It wasn't necessarily difficult. It was just annoying.
I find it slightly off-putting as well. So, like, when you're in the filing cabinet area, I actually assumed wrongly, of course, that it was going to turn out that this guy was Richard's dad because what they do. So, in Richard's section, he's like speaking to his kid, and the kid's like, "Oh, you keep the knife," and he's like, "Oh, I've got to go away for a while."
Yeah,
and then he gets the knife. They just use that again.
They do.
So it turns out that this guy he's like a secret agent for the what do you call it, the communist part of the Polish government, and he goes and speaks, and they use all the filing cabinets, and he actually says it at one point that he likes to keep family and work separate. Yes. So like the filing cabinet's obviously like the metaphor between him like compartmentalizing different parts of his life.
Yep.
And then you hear moments when he's speaking with his kids.
His kid's in a wheelchair, isn't he?
Yeah, and he literally says to the child, "I've got to go away for a bit," almost exactly like
Richard's dad, yeah.
The dad said to Richard's dad. I don't know if that was a deliberate one or a coincidental. It just seems too similar to be coincidental. But then I can't figure out the crossover if it isn't. Maybe it's just they're both members of the military. I don't know.
Well, yeah, so the one thing I will give credence to in this part, that you sort of go through it and you feel like, oh, okay, it's just going to retread this sort of abandoning father motif, except this time we're looking at the mind of the father rather than the child. But we finally we can see that you get this video screen where you see the little child in like a prison cell or a cage somewhere. Yeah. And what I liked about this is when you do find the little kid, he then sees the monster then sort of appears behind him, or the creature that we've been seeing run around appears behind him and basically just says, "Your tricks aren't going to work on me. Did you expect another vulnerable child behind the monster? Sorry.
Yeah.
Not really. That's not what's going on here. You can't, it's not going to work."
Yeah.
So I liked that little bait and switch that it did there, and it did start to retread the trope from earlier on, and then forced you to realise that it was actually not going to help you.
Yeah.
So once that's happened, it seems as if Henry really did all of this for no reason other than just to mug Thomas off in his own head.
Yeah.
Because you come back to the real world now, and we're back in Henry's point of view. He just sort of says, "Gutted, Thomas," and then reaches for a gun. But Thomas manages to knock his gun away, and he hits Henry with a wrench, and then he runs to the house that's still on fire, and you hear a voice call out for Daddy, and then he runs off calling out for Lily and Marianne, which was not really a surprise at this point that he was her dad. Yeah. But Henry's section I didn't enjoy very much at all. It was really slowly paced. When you're walking around all those cabinet sections, I hated that light section. Half the time I just tried to leg it through the light anyway, and it seemed to work. What did you do? I mean, at this point, maybe the game was getting a little bit long in the tooth, and it was overdoing these going into the mind section. I don't know, it wasn't really overdoing it. But it's just the pace of it, I think, just really got to me.
The pacing just seemed to force you to slow down without actually meriting it or paying off in any way. So it's just something that you kind of got to the point where you had to get through, which is a shame. Yeah.
Luckily, after this Thomas bit, we actually get to one of my favourite parts of the game. First of all, Marianne wakes up and then she finally remembers that Thomas is her father, Lily is her sister, and remembers that Henry tried to kill them all. She sees the creature that Thomas has just been talking to, but now Marianne sees it. He says, "Thomas is gone, it's just her." The monster says he didn't kill Lily. He was already dead by Thomas's hand by that point. And he says maybe Thomas killed Lily. He runs towards Marianne. She then, again, in a moment that would have been probably more fun to play, she just blocks it with a beam of light and sends it away. And that's the end of that. Nice and easy.
That's the end of that.
And then, yeah, this is one of the best bits of the game, I think, where you're in now free to explore the Red House.
Yeah, I think that was the best bit of the game. I'd agree. Certainly in terms of gameplay mechanics,
yes,
it was the most fun puzzle. It was just the most fun thing to interact with.
Yes, so there are quite a few puzzles really ongoing. There's some portraits you've got to find. You've got to place them on a mantelpiece. If you look at the mantelpiece in the spirit world, it will show you what the pictures are supposed to be. But really, it's just a timeline of Thomas's life. Getting married, having a child, having the second child. There's a mirror that you can use. It's in the downstairs room. You can flip to the spirit world, which you can open this doll's house using again the razor blade to cut through a skin door. So the doll's house, we find out, is basically a replica of the actual house, and it's got a small mirror in it. You can take the mirror off and place it on different rooms in the doll's house, which will then allow you to use the mirror in the real world to flick between the rooms. And you see these 3 dolls having a tea party. You've got to find masks for them. So as we said, this is one of the cooler puzzles in the game. There's a lot of exposition going on in this section of the game because you go into Lily's room. It sounds like she blames Marianne for her mum dying. But as you eventually finish off the puzzle where you're trying to collect these butterflies, you put them in the end of Lily's bed and it opens this chest. And as you do that, you get the final mask. And as you're hearing this voice, which suggests, it seems to suggest to the child Lily to leave Marianne, let her burn, and just save herself. And when you put the final mask on the doll, it reveals that this demon made a pact with Lily to allow them both to live as long as she set the demon free. Mm-hmm. So she made a pact with this demon to allow her and her sister to escape the fire. Yeah. We find out as well that after the fire, Marianne was in a coma, which is why she doesn't remember anything. And we're in a basement at this point, and we find this syringe that initially I thought made it sound as if Thomas did kill Lily by injecting her with something. Because he says you see a note, I think, that suggests, because she's hearing this voice, that she's got something inside her. And he says that he had to bring out his other side to save Lily. Yeah,
which at that point I was just assuming that basically the gift or the thing that whatever Thomas has, basically had passed it on to his children.
I guess he must have done.
And it was more powerful in his children somehow.
Yeah, it's just a bad one in Lily and a good one in Marianne. This next puzzle, there's a locked door with a combination on it to get into this bunker. And the only way I could figure out how to do this was to use the insight and see that 3 buttons had been lit up, and then just randomly guess numbers. Oh, you did it far smarter than I did. What did you do?
So I saw there was a note about I saw the code, and then there's a note in one of the lockers that says, "Congratulations on our 10-year anniversary." So I just took away 10 years.
Fuck's sake!
And it was
there,
and I was like, "That must."
Oh my god, I didn't even realise that. I just kept looking at the fact that it was 1972 and being like 1972. Come on. And then oh Jesus, yes, you're right. That's why. That would have been a lot. I knew there had to be a logic behind it, because all I saw was, I obviously didn't find or read that note properly, so I just saw buttons lit up and was doing like 9691. Nope. 1969. Nope. Just fucking hell. Oh man.
I like though that you managed to figure that out from using the insight, because I never thought to use that for some reason. It just never kept forgetting that I could use it.
You obviously assumed that there was going to be a note somewhere that tells the code on, because that is how these games work.
Yeah.
I assumed that too, but couldn't read it right.
I assumed there was a note somewhere, and in that empty box, it had its own little dialogue bit. So I was like, this is significant in some way because they keep pulling me towards it. I just don't know why. So I just used that.
Can't believe that. What an idiot I am. Obviously, once you go through the door, fucking monster's back. He chases Marianne into another room, and he says he knew you'd come here because that's where he kept them. And we are in the underground bunker, formerly of the Nazis, stolen by the Russians after they liberated Poland.
Yeah, this is where this game goes Resident Evil as all hell.
Oh, Jesus, yes. And again, where if they just had some combat, it would feel like I would feel so snug and warm in this game. Just doing Resi puzzles. So the puzzle that we're talking about here that really really pissed David off was we're trying to lower water levels to escape this bunker. So we have got a console to control and change the water levels that we can then drain from the different chambers to then enter the chambers to go down to the tanks to power on the tanks to eventually drain the water so we can leave. We even have to get a fucking valve handle. I mean, that is the most Resident Evil thing ever. But you didn't enjoy this, did you?
I didn't. I think it did what the game does on quite a few occasions. Just presents you with a scenario. It doesn't explain itself. Again, like with the breathing mechanic that it never explained.
Yeah.
This one, it just sort of plops you in front of this panel. And I just pushed buttons until I got a dialogue option. And I was like, well, I've done whatever I had to do. But then by the end of the puzzle, I'd figured out what was wanting me to do. And it was fine. I just didn't think it didn't onboard me very well.
I think there was a part of this puzzle that I never saw until I was halfway through it. Whereas if you, there was one button and I can't remember what it was, but you could press one of the buttons before it was ready to be pressed, and then she would actually say something like, "Oh, I need to get the water into the tanks, out of the chambers before this will work." But I'd already sort of tried to figure that out, but not really, because I remember I just started pressing buttons, and eventually I managed to. She just went, as you said, "Oh yeah, I can get into the west tank now." I was like, "Oh
yeah,
okay." And there was a map on the wall that I kind of glanced at and just thought, "How the hell is this map helpful? It's just numbers and colours."
Yeah.
But it's probably cleverer than we give it credit for. But it's definitely one of the most Resident Evil things ever, outside of that actual franchise.
Even the way the puzzles were solving was so Resident Evil. Like they had the basically just focusing on the thing that you were interacting with. Everything else around it was black, and then like the red wheel lever that you had to get would just spin, and then that would be it solved. It's so Resident Evil.
Yeah.
I half expected to see like loading screen doors and things like that, like doors opening and loading screens.
Yeah, going upstairs one at a time. Clink. Clink.
Yeah. Because I would say like the early part of the game feels more, to me at least, feels more Silent Hill than Resident Evil.
Yeah.
And then it makes a massive switch around that point when you go into the bunker, when it just turns into a Resident Evil game. And I was like, that was an interesting hard switch there.
Yeah. Oh God! And then so after you've done all of this, and while you're doing this valve puzzle, you're hearing the monster talking to you again about wearing you and all that stuff. Once you've got out of the exit, of course, there's the monster there, and this is more insta-death nonsense. So this is what David pointed to earlier, where you switch to the spirit world form, and then you run away from the monster into a room until it chases you, and then you have to hammer the B button to sort of blast him off, and then you can switch back to run. Yeah. God Almighty, I died so many times to this.
Or did you?
Yeah, so this is when, if you Murray could hear me huffing away, this was this bit.
That was what was happening.
I couldn't figure it out at first. I just had no idea what I was supposed to do, and thought, how the hell do I ever get back? He ran back so fast. I did not like it. I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again right now. If this monster wasn't there, or he was there, but you were able to fight him off in some way, and he didn't just have to kill you every time, and you have to reload, and it has loading, which I thought we weren't supposed to get on this console.
Yeah. So I ran into this. I remember I texted you when I did this section and went, I can't wait to tell you about the bug. And then I didn't actually tell you about the bug. So I got a bug here the first time I did it. I died the first time because so what happened was I ran into the room that I was meant to. I was like, oh, it obviously wants me to run here as a ghost. So I ran there and it was a dead end. And I was like, what's it want me to do? And I didn't realize until it was like, it almost caught me that what I was meant to zap back to my human body and then run through. So I did it slightly too late, and as I was zapping back to my human body, the monster picked me up. So I got picked up as I was zapping back to my human body, the game took me back to my human body, but I couldn't move. And I could hear the sort of death animation playing out audibly. But then as it was doing that, the monster came flying back out the corridor, obviously because it's meant to be chasing you.
He's having a celebratory
and it ran
lap.
up. It ran up to me where I was hiding, ran past me, and then just started running into a wall. And its legs were just like over and over again as it was running on the spot. And then eventually the game crashed me back to desktop.
Oh, I thought you were going to say you were just able to just stroll up.
No, and then I had to redo that whole section again.
Weird.
Because the game had bugged out on me. But yeah, that was an odd one.
Were you running away and then switching back, or were you letting him grab you and then switch back?
So I think what we were meant to do is run away, and as he comes in, switch and then run. But what I did, because I was slightly slow in the uptake, is he was picking me up as I was switching back.
Yeah, because he picked me up, and it just says it actually had a prompt on screen to just hammer the B button to switch back to your body.
So I didn't get that prompt at all.
Yeah. So for the first time ever, you're apparently able to just escape back out of the spirit world into your normal body and just walk up to the thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's electrocuted again. Off he goes. We then get into the living quarters of the bunker, but the power gets fried, so we need to restore it again. Really resi, trying to find little knobs and
the fuse unscrewing is so Resident Evil.
Yeah, because there's no hand that does it; it just kind of unscrews itself and falls out.
Yeah.
And then we get to Lily's room in the bunker that's got salt lined all over the walls, and it shows a note that says Thomas used salt and alchemy to banish his inner demon, so he could be alone in this bunker. And he obviously tried the same for Lily, and he hooked it up to a syringe that had like sodium chlorate or whatever it is.
Right, okay, I never figured this out. Yeah, I never figured out what the hell that was, because I was like, is there a vampire now? What is going on?
Somehow he found out that salt keeps the demons away, so he drip-fed salt into Lily so that she, I guess, couldn't be spoken to by her demon anymore either.
What a strange cultural phenomenon that is, that we have somewhere decided that demons and ghosts and vampire, like, they don't like salt. What's wrong with salt? So magical about some
high cholesterol,
some sodium.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They like really bland food without salt in it.
Yeah.
Or it has to just be. I know garlic they don't like either, do they? Who knows? They don't like flavouring, I guess.
No, do not give them salt and vinegar on their chips. They will not be happy.
Exactly. So yeah, back to the resi stuff. We do this power balancing puzzle where you've got to flick these little switches to try and get the power in the middle. Was so. Oh god, I was in my element here. I was really enjoying these puzzles, even though they were just so rip-offs. I didn't even care at this point.
Yeah, no, I quite like this section, and it was so on the nose though. You just kind of like a literal underground bunker. Like, it is so resi on the nose.
All we need now is a self-destruct sequence, and we're done.
Yeah.
There's the last puzzles we need to
even
do now.
Actually, in saying that, even the evil dog, was it Henry, had a Resident Evil stink about it.
Oh yeah, it's like when all their villains in the game in all Resident Evil games have to morph into some kind of gross thing at some point. So yeah. The final puzzle for this game we need to do is just find some broken pieces of a mirror. Did you find that there was a radio in one of the toilets? You could turn it on, and it would play as a soundtrack. I hated that shit, so I just went back and turned it off. I was like, fuck, this is horrible.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
So I think I stopped playing at that point, and then the game booted me back. So I had to something happened anyway that I was messing about the radio twice. The first time I put the radio on, and I was like, well, I better turn that off again, otherwise the monster will hear me.
Yeah.
So I just turned it off and just carried on. The second time I actually let it play, and it's quite funny how it just sort of becomes like a theme tune to that section.
Yeah. There's definitely, there's what better way to tell you you're not in danger by playing a nice little ballad as you walk around rooms looking for mirror pieces. So once you've found the pieces of the mirror, you stick it in. She tries to cross over to the spirit world. But as she goes through, she gets caught by Thomas, and then he suddenly realizes what he's doing and who he's strangling. Tells Marianne that she's so important, and that by sending away Henry, I think that's right at the beginning of the game. You do that. I think he's the guy, one of the two masks that you have to get in that very first section where you're searching for him.
Okay.
So by doing that, you allow Thomas to break free from Henry's world, where apparently he was stuck all this time.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, he says he no longer feels Thomas's presence in the material world, so he doesn't know where he is. He's obviously become very separated from his real world self. He asks Marianne to tell him how it all started, and this is where we get the reveal that the beginning cutscene of the game, and every time we've broken away to Marianne sitting at a desk telling the story, she's actually been telling it to Thomas. And this is where she repeats, it all starts with a dead girl, and this is where we get the full circle cut back to the start of the game. Quite cool, I thought.
Yeah. Really enjoyed that bit. And then I just a bit thrown by, because like Henry, that seemed to have been signifying Henry's sort of bad side, but actually when you meet him, he's fine. So I didn't quite get that bit.
Well,
but apart from that.
Yeah. Thanks, Marianne. Don't find out that I actually killed you and burnt your house down. Bye. So we find out that Richard obviously abusing Lily as a child is what unleashed the demon. Thomas says the fact that... Spirit World Thomas says the fact that Thomas called Marianne in the material world somehow proves that Lily is still alive. I didn't quite get why. But he says that Marianne needs to go to the lake to save Lily. He says he'll hold off the monster for as long as he can. It means that Marianne's got to leave him there. So he forces Marianne's hand onto his head, or his hand into his anyway, and he sort of sends himself away. Quite a hero's... I assume that's his death. He's passing over then, I guess.
Yeah, it's unclear, isn't it?
We then get to the lake. Lillian is there. So she reveals that Thomas knew that that Lily's powers were too dangerous, and that's why he left Marianne in this hospital, because we find out that he just abandoned her in a hospital at some point when she was in this coma. But that was why he thought she could have a normal life. Obviously, she then ended up with Jack. It's also then Lily reveals that's why Thomas locked her away, because her monster was too powerful, but it still got out. Because I think in Lily's room you can see the door's forced open, isn't it? It's got this all black scorches all over.
Yeah.
So Lily then says Marianne's the only one who can fix it, and it turns out that this dream, where it all begins with a dead girl, is not a dream. It's not the past. It's actually what Lily wants to now happen. So the girl in the dream isn't shot and killed in the past. That's what Lily wants to do to her right now. So she gets out a gun and says that if the host is alive, then the spirit can't be sent away, and that's why the monster couldn't be killed in the spirit world, and that's why Sadness didn't want to leave. At this point, the monster appears on the split screen, so you see him lurching towards Marianne in the spirit world. Obviously, there's nothing in the material world. You see Marianne holding the gun, pointing it at the spirit, but again, you only see the gun in the spirit world. So in the material world, she's just holding nothing. But then she points the gun at herself, and she says the monster needs a medium strong enough to sustain it. Lily pleads with her to kill her and set her free, but Marianne hears Thomas's voice say that she can't save everyone. The screen goes black, we hear a gunshot, and the game ends. What do you think? What do you think's happened? What do you think happens at the end here? Who do you think gets shotted?
Yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest. My gut says she shot herself.
I can't believe anything other than that.
Yeah, but I don't know. What did you think about this story? I feel like I often come across when I've been thinking about this game to you, speaking about it briefly, that I didn't like it. I did like it. I just didn't think I just don't think it's as good as a lot of the reviews suggest it. It's like I see a lot of 9s and 10s going around. I think it's a 7 or a 6.
Agreed.
It's fine. It's good and enjoyable, but it's not a classic.
No, I think I just sort of said earlier that I think a lot of the metaphors are a bit ham-fisted in a way. I enjoy the reveal of she's been talking to Thomas the whole time.
Yeah.
That bit I enjoyed because, as I said, I found his story a bit more interesting than Marianne's one herself. And this whole bit with Lily all of a sudden just kind of, I've been stood by a lake this whole time, mate. And she looks fucking horrible as well. She's all like, what? Maybe that's because she's got salt all in her blood now.
Yeah.
She's been living in a dark bunker, having salt drip to her veins. I don't know. It just seemed very quickly like there was no. The player doesn't have any conflict in this. There's no agonizing choice for you to make. There's no real effort to get to Lily. It's just you need to go to the lake. Okay, here I am at the lake, and there's Lily.
Yeah. I was dreading that it was going to have some sort of boss battle with this monster at the end. I'm so glad they moved away from that.
That's a fair point, actually. Yeah, that is true. Imagine it just goes to like a first-person shooter, and you just suddenly just like pop in the monster. Yeah.
I just had visions of like creeping, zapping the monster a few times.
I suppose.
I'm glad they didn't.
Yeah, I suppose the fact that Lily is portrayed as a sympathetic character is fine. I'd prefer that than for her to be like, it was me all along, and she's just this evil bitch, and then you just have to shoot her. I do like the fact that you've got the choice that Marianne has to make, but I can't believe she does anything other than kill herself. Maybe because she just feels sorry, but she's had their life up to now, and Lily's just been stuck there. But what life has Lily got at this point? Yes, fine. Yeah, the demon's gone, but
yeah. There's also quite a lot of allusion throughout the game that Marianne's got quite severe mental health issues, and she's thought about suicide and stuff like that. And I did kind of wonder if that was there was a bit of a metaphor in there. But yeah, the game is good, decent, not great. Like I said, I think it does boil down to me to purely be it's a warts and all love letter to old Resident Evil and Silent Hill games. There are good aspects to that in which the game excels, but there's also bad aspects to that in which the game does a lot of tripping over the same things that those games do. Except it did it 25 years later, when we've all moved on and done things better than what those games did, which is a shame.
Yeah, some of the puzzles, as I said, were just a little bit too easy. There wasn't a lot of until the end when it started to really dial into the Resident Evil stuff. There wasn't a lot of brain power that was needed to do any of these. It was just find something and then put it in something else. And
which a lot of the time boiled down to run around the room, press LB to have your sense go, or look for a button prompt.
Yeah, exactly. The button prompt stuff was really pointless. I don't understand why they had to totally signpost stuff and you have to click this before you can then click this, rather than just you already know what the answer is, so off you go and figure it out. I didn't understand why they had to force that in there. And fundamentally, the worst thing about this game is its performance and the fact that it's not in any way a WoW killer app for the current new console that we just spent all this money on. It's actually actively worse than a lot of Xbox One games in almost all aspects. Visually, the way it runs, the animation, the bugs, the glitches. It's a shame. They're a smaller studio, fair enough. They've clearly got promise, but I think this seems to feed into what I've heard about their previous games, like Layers of Fear, where it's creepy and weird, but the games just mechanically aren't all that good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So what we briefly discussed yesterday when I text you is that what a cool thing would be to do at the end of this year is to do our own Game of the Year awards based on only the games that we've covered on this podcast. So I can't see this doing very well in those, but we never know.
It might win the award for best Team Bluebird Game of the Year.
Yeah, good point. So now the game is over. We've told you what we think about it. We've talked you all the way through it. Now all it leaves is for David to reveal what game he wants us to play for the next episode, because I think we've had a discussion, but I don't know if you've actually decided on it. So I'm on tenterhooks. So tell me.
I think I'm not going to tell you what the other game. Tell people what the other game is, because I do want to get to it at some point once I've perhaps bought myself a PC that can run the game. But so in the meantime, next up we've got Gears of War. We're going to play the OG Gears of War game. We're going to do it co-op as well, just for the fun of it, really. Yeah. Because I've played this game 3 times through over the last decade. So play it. I don't know if I've ever played it start to finish co-op.
Well, I have
got to. Yeah. I have. I think the furthest I got in Gears of War was when you go to the emulsion plant and it starts to feel a bit like a horror game. I think I've got up to their co-op and then never finished it. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, you were a massive fan of these back on the 360.
Huge Gears fan. Huge Gears fan. I think I've read most of the books. I used to have like models decorating my room. Yeah, I was a huge fan of Gears. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it's aged as well, because last time I played it, it actually aged pretty favourably. So see how it holds up.
Was that when you played the remastered thing?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Which we may as well play. That's probably the best way to play it. Yeah. Between this podcast on the Medium and Gears of War, we're going to have another list podcast to give you guys a bit of time to play through the game, and I guess you'll find out what that is when we do it.
Also gives us time to just play loads of Apex Legends and ignore the podcast game for a bit. Season 8 and all that. But yeah, it's a mystery ranking list at this point. We're not entirely sure what we're going to do. It's David's choice. He's chosen Gears of War, and he's going to choose the top 10, and then after that I will pick whatever game I want to play. Maybe there'll be a new game out by that point, but I don't think there will. I don't really know what's coming up.
No, there's not a lot. But yeah, so in the meantime, you can keep up to date with or find out when the next podcast is dropping. I mean, what you actually should do with the next podcast is subscribe to whatever podcast feed you use, because you'll find us there, and then you'll get it when it drops. But you can also check out GoombaStop.com, who are being so nice as to promote the podcast for us, and follow us on Twitter, which again is @WinnerIsYouPod.
Yeah.
Which I suppose brings us to the end of this episode.
It bloody well does.
And with that, I have been David, he has been Alex, we have been a Winner Is You podcast, and I'm out.
Keep gaming on medium difficulty.